go.
13 absolutely nightmarish Silent Hill-inspired games for the horror fans. The Silent Hill franchise is a one-of-a-kind experience. The anxiety it caused could not be duplicated by any other game, but many tried and succeeded in capturing part of the fear that Silent Hill elicited. Konami released Silent Hill 20 years ago. The game, along with Capcom's Resident Evil, helped popularize the survival horror action thriller genre, which is defined by suspenseful exploration, expressionistic camera angles, diabolical environmental puzzles, and restricted armament, making every encounter with a creature a fatal battle. The roles are murkier in Silent Hill, which was initially classified as a psychological horror game. Harry Mason, the protagonist, is a regular person who is terrified and confused by an accident. He becomes out of breath after short distances, and the weapon aiming mechanic is clunky and incorrect, symbolizing his inexperience. This is a game in which the protagonist and, via him, the player, are purposely disempowered. Internal struggle and psychological collapse are important themes of Silent Hill. We are pushed to mistrust the validity of what Harry is witnessing as he wanders the abandoned town, seeking clues and encountering its strange, wounded people. Other characters constantly doubt reality, and the storyline dramatically contradicts itself, with blackouts and nightmare sequences implying Harry is hallucinating. The game's creators wanted to create a horror game that was more than just jump scares, something unsettling, unexpected, and rebellious. They discovered that blending ambiguity and familiarity, psychology and sexuality, and naturalism and symbolism could be done on a shoestring budget and with minimal technological resources. Every tight, dark, strange horror game that follows owes a tribute to Silent Hill's artistry, from Dead Space and Fear to Soma. It warned the gamer that genuine terror may be found only in the fog, abandoned hospitals, and overgrown cemeteries. It's been with us the whole time. So today, we will be looking at 13 terrifying games which were inspired by the Silent Hill franchise. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Condemned Criminal Origins is a Sega-published first-person survival horror game created by Monolith Productions. The game was launched globally in 2005, with the creator mentioning films such as Silence of the Lambs, Seven, and Saw as inspiration. It focuses on melee fighting and puzzle solving, including fingerprinting and evidence collection. Set in the fictitious American city of Metro, you will play as Ethan Thomas, a crime scene investigator with the FBI Serial Crime Unit, as he travels through the city's seedier areas. As he seeks the elusive serial killer X, who framed him for murder, his trip takes him through a variety of condemned buildings. Along the way, Ethan must utilize his investigative intuition and technology to study evidence left behind by SKX, all while battling the brutally psychotic residents of Metro City, who appear to be driven insane by a strange, though seemingly unrelated force. Condemned's visual quality goes a long way toward keeping you engrossed, even when the action becomes boring. We can't emphasize how impressive a lot of the hand-to-hand combat looks. You could squirm if you rake your crowbar over an enemy's jaw, and then watch him spew blood as he whirls around wildly. Face is scarlet for more than just fury. This game is dark. It looks beautiful. The sound is insane. The melee combat system is fascinating, and it's one of the scariest games you'll ever play. Despite the game's fairly predictable level developments and riddles, you'll have a hard time being displeased with this one. The Evil Within 2, 2017. The Evil Within 2 is a survival horror video game published by Bethesda Softworks and developed by Tango Gameworks. It was published globally in October 2017 and is the sequel to The Evil Within, which was released in 2014. The game is a survival horror game. Similar to its predecessor, the player gets control of investigator Sebastian Castellanos, who must descend into the realm of Union to rescue his daughter Lily in this third-person game. Casual, survival, and nightmare. There are 3 difficulty levels available, with the latter option being suggested for gamers who appreciated the previous game's difficulty curve. The Evil Within 2 has bigger areas and different options for players to go through a level. The player is also given an object known as the Communicator, which aids in highlighting the game's objectives, resources, and adversaries. It also exposes resident spots, which provide information about what transpired in Union's universe. Players are free to roam the map region, completing side tasks and scouting for valuable resources. Players can engage in direct combat with foes using weapons such as firearms, or they can employ stealth to avoid detection and sneak behind enemies to kill them discreetly. Players may acquire materials to make new things such as ammunition in the game's crafting system. Players can make goods at any moment during the game. However, using a workbench uses fewer materials. There is also a customization system. Sebastian's talents may be customized with the green gel, which was introduced in the previous game and is separated into 5 different trees: health, stealth, combat, recuperation, and athletics. This game provides you a lot more freedom to explore a far larger survival horror playground than the original. Although the plot is disjointed and the protagonist is weak, being pursued through an intriguingly bizarre world by numerous and disturbing creatures will keep your heart rate up thanks to the rigid compliance to the most important survival horror rule: you should always be on the back foot. Daymare, 1998-2019. Invader Studios' Daymare 1998 is a third-person survival horror game that was released in 2019 by Destructive Creations and All In Games. The game begins on August 20th, 1998, at Aegis Laboratory, a top-secret government facility created on North Blue 2, a small island off the coast of Washington that is part of the North Fall Island archipelago. The scene then shifts to Keene Sight, a quiet and tranquil Idaho hamlet surrounded by an unending forest. The story is told from the perspective of 3 characters: the operative codenamed Liev, an elite soldier of the special unit Hades, Hexacore Advanced Division for Extraction and Search, the helicopter pilot Captain David Raven Hale, and Samuel Walker, a forest ranger from the Vermilion Forest that surrounds the Red Crest Mountains of Keene Sight. The Department of Defense dispatches 2 teams of Hades operatives from Hexacore Biogenetics Keene Sight HQ to investigate the cause of the accident, recover top-secret research and samples, and erase all evidence of what happened before the automatic security system cleanses the entire compound a few hours after the latest urgent transmissions from Aegis concerning the leak of an extremely lethal experimental weapon. Puzzles, relentless opponents, inventory management, and a multi-character tale are all promised in Daymare. In general, the game appears to be well planned. The stages are rather straight, with little opportunity for mistake. You may miss the occasional ammunition drop, but if you're an explorer, you'll eventually get there. None of the levels seem unfinished or rudimentary, and the placement of the zombie hordes is reason enough to have a change of undies handy. Off-camera sounds and some really spooky music, or quiet, contribute to the game's overall tension and urgency. I definitely recommend playing with headphones on for that added layer of suspense and fear. If you like survival horror games, or recall the 1990s, you should pick this up. Don't anticipate anything groundbreaking, but expect gruesome, stressful fun traversing an already familiar landscape. Cry of Fear, 2012. Cry of Fear is a survival horror game created by Team Psych Scholar, a small indie Swedish firm. It was first published as a mod for the video game Half-Life in 2012, but it was later released as a separate product the following year. Simon Henriksen, a 19-year-old who wakes up in an alley after being hit by a car, is the protagonist. To proceed, the player must travel the city, solving riddles and killing creatures. The game alternates between conventional gameplay levels, which depict the city and its environs, and nightmare levels, which are comparable to those seen in the Silent Hill games. Similar to Silent Hill, Cry for Fear uses its horror to not only scare the player, but to try and stay with them long after completion. It uses its subject matter to highlight the extremely sensitive topic of mental health and the horrors that come with it. The restricted inventory system in Cry of Fear allows the player to carry just 6 objects at a time and does not halt the game while the inventory panel is open. Another interesting feature is the option to dual-wield inventory items, enabling you to employ 2 weapons or 1 weapon and a light source at the same time. From the inventory panel, you can also combine items. Morphine syringes are used to restore health, although they might obscure the player's eyesight if used too much. Stamina is depleted by vigorous activities like running and leaping, and it can be replenished by resting or using morphine injections. A unique co-op campaign for up to 4 players is also available, which follows a parallel narrative in which the players control a gang of police officers who become stuck in the nightmare world while investigating Simon. Team Psych Scholar strives to undermine your comfort in the most terrifying ways conceivable every time you think you've gotten the hang of the game. It's pure game creation, and it's really inspirational to see a mod like this bloom into its own separate experience. It's a very moving event that offers an agonizingly raw and honest look at mental illness and the issues that surround it. Cry of Fear is a free game on Steam that I highly suggest to any horror enthusiast searching for a really terrifying experience.
Inmate, back in your cell. Everything's under control.
The Suffering, 2004. The Suffering is a first-person and third-person shooter horror video game developed by Surreal Software and published by Midway Games for PlayStation and Xbox and by Encore for PC. The Suffering tells the narrative of Torque, a man on death row for the murders of his ex-wife and 2 children, a crime for which he has no recollection. An earthquake strikes Carnet Island, off the coast of Maryland, shortly after he arrives in Abbott State Penitentiary, resulting in the jail being assaulted by unique otherworldly dangers. Torque strives to battle his way to freedom after being set free while fighting his personal problems and trying to recall what happened to his family. The game has 3 endings, each of which discloses a different version of Torque's family's murder, based on the player's gaming decisions during the game. From both first and third-person viewpoints, the game is completely playable, with all action available in all modes. Torque can run, shoot, leap, interact with NPCs, and utilize various tools. The majority of the monsters in the game are representations of various execution methods used on Carnate Island. An on-screen meter named Torque's Insanity Meter begins to fill as he kills foes during the game. When it's full, it starts flashing, and Torque can turn into a monster at this time. Torque may tear adversaries apart in this state and unleash a barrage of deadly assaults. The more foes Torque kills while in this state, the more strong he grows and the more combo moves he can do. Torque's health depletes automatically in this state, and if he does not return to his human form before his health meter reaches 0, he will die. The Suffering is a breath of fresh death rattle in a genre filled with sequels and feeble efforts at horror. The action is fast-paced, the animals are terrifying, and the plot has some very gruesome themes. There aren't enough words to describe the horrifying reality that has been built here. Every detail of your surroundings, every action you do, has been designed to heighten the tension and put you in a tense frame of mind. Just remember to play with your lights on. Siren, 2003. Siren is a survival horror stealth game for the PlayStation 2 that was created by Project Siren, a development team under Japan Studio, and released by Sony Computer Entertainment in 2003. The narrative of the game centers on a cast of interrelated people that have the ability to see and hear what a character nearby sees. 2 sequels, a loose film version, and 2 manga adaptations followed. Siren tells the narrative through the viewpoints of often survivors of a supernatural calamity that occurred in the fictitious rural Japanese town of Hanuta in 2003. These events are portrayed in a non-chronological sequence and focus on the prospective characters' attempts to both flee the town and discover the truth about what happened in the 3 days following the calamity. The game is separated into stages, each of which takes place in one of the 10 regions in Hanuta's hamlet, and is grouped chronologically in the Link Navigator table. To finish a level, the player must achieve a primary objective, which generally entails reaching an exit point, defeating undead monsters known as shobito, or discovering an item. The butterfly effect connects objectives across stages, and a character's actions in one stage might activate a secondary objective in another. There are many artifacts strewn about each stage that provide further information about the plot's backstory. These things are saved in a catalog when they are collected, and can be accessed at any point during the game's lifetime. The player characters in the game have a psychic ability known as sight jacking, which allows them to see and hear everything a nearby shibito or a human who sees and hears, allowing them to locate their location as well as learn about their actions and the location of available goods. Rather than fighting shibito, the game urges the player to avoid them. To escape notice, characters can stroll softly, avoid using a flashlight, and conceal themselves behind things. In order to complete some mission goals, the player character must use artifacts and/or the surroundings to divert shibito from their action. Others demand that the player accompany a non-player character. In order to attract the attention of neighboring shibito, player characters can yell at any moment. While the desire to learn what occurred in Hanuta's village might keep you going, it's a tough ride through all the tiresome trial and error you have to go through just to pass a level and move on. Fans of the genre looking for something different could be interested in Siren if they have a lot of patience, but they're the only ones this game is genuinely designed for. Them and Us, 2021. Them and Us is a hardcore survival horror game with a focus on atmosphere and player immersion. The game was developed by Tendo Games and was released in 2021. This is the newest game on our list, and it will surely make a chill run down your spine. This game is a loving tribute to classic survival horror games like Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark, and of course, Silent Hill. The plot is straightforward. A lone hero is stuck in a haunted home with closed doors, endless halls, and plenty of terrible animals hungry to feast on their blood. A captivating comic book style sequence greets you as you begin the game. You meet Alicia, a deranged former paramedic who is on death row for unclear reasons, but is obsessed with finding her lost daughter. She awakens in a confined chamber in an old house on a mysterious island with no recall of her location after a terrible rebellion on a prison bus, and begins her journey to escape. Alicia begins by creating a tiny inventory that can be viewed at any time and includes specific files for recovered papers and personal remarks. To handle what you'll bring and what you'll leave behind, you'll need to plan ahead of time. Interestingly, from a start, you have the option of choosing between two camera perspectives, tank controls with fixed camera angles, or an over-the-shoulder perspective. It's simple enough to navigate the surroundings. Areas of the estate and its surroundings are sealed behind a variety of doors and small chores that demand research and careful attention to detail, as one might expect from the genre. To advance, you'll need to collect levers, crests, books, tools, and other items. The puzzles range from simple to complex, but if you take the time to hunt for them and learn patience, you'll find all the answers you need. The shambling dead will be your major adversary, and they will behave as you would anticipate. Dealing with one is simple enough, but dealing with two or three pushes you to consider your alternatives. They are capable of random behavior to keep you on your toes, especially if you opt to fight them in close-range combat with your trusty knife to conserve ammo. In addition to blindly beelining towards you with arms spread, your depleting ammo and the rising bestiary of adversary kinds that stand between you and escape will keep you on your toes, as will the atmosphere and persistent sense of dread. It certainly takes inspiration from Amnesia: The Dark Descent in terms of plot and tone, which is a wonderful and terrible thing together at the same time. Rule of Rose, 2006. Punchline's Rule of Rose is a survival horror video game for the PlayStation 2. Set in 1930s England, the story follows Jennifer, a 19-year-old woman who finds herself stuck in a society dominated by young girls who have created a class structure known as the Red Canyon Aristocrats. Sony Computer Entertainment initially published it in Japan in 2006. After Sony Computer Entertainment's American and European divisions expressed no interest in localizing the game, Atlas USA in North America and 505 Games in Europe published it later that year. The story of Rose revolves around Jennifer, an average, fragile girl, and her horrific childhood experiences, which sometimes materialize in exaggerated ways. The setting for the game is in rural Cardington, Bedfordshire, England, around 1930, just before World War II broke out. The game follows Jennifer, a 19-year-old orphan, as she reminisces about her childhood experiences as an adult. Jennifer is woken by a mysterious boy, who gives her an unfinished, handcrafted tale and asks her to read it during a bus trip down a remote road in March. Before Jennifer can return the book to the kid, he rushes off the bus, and Jennifer pursues him to the Rose Garden Orphanage, which is located in a neighboring woodland. Jennifer discovers the orphanage to be an abandoned and crumbling structure occupied solely by a gang of vicious orphaned youngsters who can be seen thrashing a bloodied bag with sticks. After that, as you can guess, she goes inside the orphanage and begins an adventure. Combat is nearly entirely meleeing, with a wide variety of improvised weapons such as kitchen knives and pipes accessible. Jennifer is a fearful character, with melee strikes that aren't very powerful or long-ranged. Rather than fighting, evading attackers is frequently a more effective tactic. All foes in the game, with the exception of a few bosses, are imps. Skinny, doll-like creatures the size of young children. Along with conventional imps, many animal-headed imps emerge throughout the game. Every game level takes place over the course of a month. Each chapter starts with the reading of a handcrafted storybook about the chapter's narrative. Jennifer is entrusted with locating a certain object that will be given to the aristocracy at the end of each level. Rule of Rose is an intriguing and engrossing adult mystery horror. Its visual presentation is usually breathtaking, and the creativity and maturity with which it addresses its subject matter have created a memorable experience. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, 2010. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a survival horror-themed first-person adventure game. It is widely acknowledged as one of the best games in the genre to have ever been released. Daniel is the protagonist, and he must tour Castle Brennenburg while avoiding perils and completing puzzles. Physical object interaction is retained from the Penumbra series, allowing for physics-based puzzles and actions, such as opening doors and repairing machinery. The game's difficulty level may be changed before it starts, but it cannot be changed once it is started. Daniel's sanity must be regulated, focusing upon an afraid of darkness mechanism in addition to his health. Staying in the dark for too long, experiencing frightening occurrences, or staring directly at creatures all diminish sanity. Low sanity produces visual and aural hallucinations, as well as an increased likelihood of attracting monsters, but total sanity depletion leads to a temporary loss of movement or death at higher difficulties. If no light sources are available, Daniel may use tinderboxes to light candles and torches, or he may deploy an oil-burning lantern. However, the number of tinderboxes and oil accessible are both limited, especially under more challenging situations. If a monster spots Daniel, it will pursue him until he manages to get away from it. Daniel has no methods of defending himself against creatures, so he must either hide or flee. Daniel can only endure a few strikes from a monster before dying, causing the game's most recent save to load. Let's be honest, the puzzles in Amnesia: The Dark Descent isn't very great considering the modern games, and the voice acting may range from credible to ridiculous, but the mood Frictional has created is as intense as it gets. It's a terrifying story that starts out threatening and troubling you, and only gets worse as you advance. Any horror enthusiast, Lovecraft aficionado, or anyone with even a smidgen of interest should check out Amnesia. Few games are capable of creating such a terrifying mood. Haunting Ground, 2005. Haunting Ground, also known as Demento in Japan, is a 2005 PlayStation 2 survival horror video game developed and released by Capcom. Fiona Belli is a young lady who wakes up in a castle prison after being engaged in a vehicle accident. She instantly meets a white shepherd named Huey and begins exploring the castle with his help in order to find a way out and learn more about the castle and its occupants. The game bears numerous resemblances to Capcom's former survival horror title Clock Tower 3, and has been dubbed the Clock Tower series' spiritual successor. Fiona is controlled by the player as she explores the surroundings, evades and hides from hostile pursuit, and battles against the castle's residents on occasion. When Fiona is in danger, she might become panicked and start running on her own, causing the player to lose control. Huey is a key character in the game, and he follows Fiona throughout the entire time. He may be given commands to explore the surroundings, attack opponents, and assist Fiona in any way he can. Capcom included the dog element during development because they believed that a survival horror game with a lone female protagonist would be unappealing to both retailers and gamers. Fiona is thrown into the story with no recall of how she got there, why she's trapped in a dog cage, or why she's clad in little more than a bedsheet as the story begins. From that point on, the journey is all about figuring out why Fiona is locked in the creepy castle and how she'll get out. However, the only way to accomplish so is to begin exploring the 130-plus rooms available to her. The mix of high-end presentation, frightening sensuality, and psychological mind-jogging and haunting ground makes it one of the most intriguing games ever released. However, it is not suitable for everyone.
Little pig.
Outlast, 2013. Red Barrels created and released Outlast, a first-person survival horror video game. Miles Upshur, a freelance investigative journalist, chooses to look into a distant psychiatric facility called Mount Massive Asylum, which is nestled deep in the mountains of Lake County, Colorado. There are mostly stealth jumping components in the game. The player may move about via walking, running, crouching, jumping, climbing ladders, and vaulting over things. However, unlike typical video games, there is no visible health meter on the screen, and the player is unable to strike foes. In order to survive, the player must rely on stealth methods such as hiding in lockers, slipping past opponents, keeping in the shadows, and hiding behind objects. In addition, the player can try to outrun their pursuers. The game will reset to the most recent checkpoint if the player dies. The majority of the hospital is dark, and the only method for the player to see in the dark is via the lens of a night vision camera. Using night vision mode will progressively deplete the battery supply, which is limited, forcing the player to scour the institution for fresh batteries. Outlast relies heavily on classic jump scares and oral clues to warn the player when an opponent has spotted them. If the player uses their camera to record particular incidents, Miles will make a note about it, giving them further insight into his thinking. Documents can be gathered that provide history and other explanatory information about the institution, such as pages culled from patient diaries and hospital staff reports. Found footage films like Grave Encounters and Wreck were the certain inspiration behind the game. It's a stressful, terrible journey that takes away your ability to protect yourself as you struggle to dodge the insane people that prowl the corridors of this terrifyingly beautiful world. As you explore the horrors that lurk beneath Mount Massive Asylum, you'll flee, hide, and generally be afraid.
Stop! No! Damn it, die! No! No! No!
Alan Wake, 2010. Alan Wake is an action-adventure game created by Remedy Entertainment and published by Microsoft Studios. It was released in May 2010 for the Xbox 360 and February 2012 for Microsoft Windows. The narrative follows best-selling thriller author Alan Wake as he tries to solve the mystery of his wife's disappearance while on vacation in the small fictitious town of Bright Falls, Washington, all while having events from his newest novel, which he can't remember writing, come to life. Alan Wake has the tempo and structure of a thriller television series, with narrative twists and cliffhangers in each episode. The tale is extended by 2 bonus episodes, titled The Signal and The Writer, which were released as downloadable content DLC within the same year as the game. They form the first season of a potentially longer tale when they work together. A 6-episode live-action web series titled Bright Falls serves as a prelude to the game, while a variety of connected publications further the Alan Wake tale. A darkness is engulfing individuals, animals, and items in the game. The Taken, as they are known, are homicidal shadows who assault Wake with their own weapons, which range from mallets and knives to shovels and chainsaws. They differ in terms of speed, size, and the amount of damage they can withstand, and some can teleport short distances. Aside from the Taken, the player must also contend with possessed ravens and animated items. Remedy has done an excellent job of combining aspects of written work, television, and video games to produce a terrifying, hilarious, and thrilling experience that is equally enjoyable to play as it is to watch. The Darkness Within 2, The Dark Lineage, 2010. Darkness Within 2, The Dark Lineage is a Zoetrope Interactive and Iceberg Interactive first-person adventure horror thriller video game released in 2010. The game is a sequel to Darkness Within, In Pursuit of Loeth Nolder, and it is part of a series of adventure games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, the famed horror writer. Players assume the character of police detective Howard Loreed, who is affected by the paranormal events in the last game. Now Howard realizes that the lunacy that is threatening to engulf him is linked to his own horrific history. This game features a first-person perspective similar to that of most first-person shooters, unlike its predecessor, which used a typical mysterious manner of movement. The game combines aspects of mystery, suspense, and horror to create a constantly tense experience. You'll spend a lot of time in the game wandering a tiny village, collecting clues and notes that will help you figure out the plot. Other gloomy sights include the forests, as well as the village's dark caverns and catacombs. You'll have to be discreet in your exploration, because your presence isn't welcome here. The game's visuals really stand out, and they provide a lot of the game's mood. The game's background is always black, giving the impression that a shadow lurks around every corner. The audio also contributes to the overall ambience. Darkness Within 2, The Dark Lineage, is a mystery novel with a dark backdrop and creepy overtones that deliver all of that and more. That's it for this one, guys. Let us know in the comments how many games you guys have tried out from the list, and don't forget to like and share, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next one.